Let's continue the conversation on Aziz Bandaogo transferring to the University of Cincinnati and just how good he makes the Bearcats men's basketball roster in their first season in the Big 12.
Our Locked On Bearcats, your daily podcast on the Cincinnati Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, here we go. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day, free and available wherever you listen to podcasts, including on YouTube. So if you're watching us, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Follow us to get an alert every time we drop a new episode. Today's episode of Locked On Bearcats is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. My name is Alex Frank, your host each and every day here on Locked On Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Tuesday, May 23rd, 39 days away from the Cincinnati Bearcats officially being members of the Big 12. And as Russ Heltman, who joins me today, my colleague from AllBearcats and Sports Illustrated, thank you, John and Chris, who came up to me at the Day 1 tour in Columbus and said how much they enjoy when Russ, you and I are on the show together, so it's good to have you back. And as you and I were talking over the weekend, tourney time potentially next year?
That's the expectation, pending some second transfer waivers that the Bearcats' two incoming bid man are going to have to get, and Jamil Reynolds coming over from Temple after a transfer from UCF, and Aziz Bandaogo, the marquee ace in the hole addition for Wes Miller and this staff. They needed defense, Alex. You and I talked about defense ad nauseum as the Achilles heel 2 weeks ago. What did Wes Miller go and do? Found the best available defensive stalwart in the entire transfer portal still available, and it's Aziz Bandaogo, who will have to get a mental health transfer waiver. He told Jonathan Gavoni of ESPN that's what he will seek going into his second transfer stint after leaving Akron last year to go to Utah Valley to replace Faradal's Alma, and now he has left Utah Valley to go into the Big 12 as a 7-foot, double-double averaging, fifth leading shot blocker in the nation type of talent that really brings this entire roster together. And when I put together the entire full projection of the team and that starting five this morning, Alex, my eyes just lit up. This talent, the level of talent on this team and the way that Wes Miller and his staff has leveled up each and every offseason, it's something to marvel at. Something to marvel at.
It definitely is. It speaks to the people I talk to, his masterful abilities as a recruiter. And I know this program has had 2 rebuilding seasons, but you look at what he's done as far as a recruiter, Russ, and let's not forget, and I said this yesterday, you think about where this program was 2 years ago at this time. When Wes Miller took over, there were just 4 scholarship players on the roster. And now he has an opportunity, Russ, and I was thinking about this over the weekend. He has an opportunity to potentially put this program not just back on the map, but restore it as the signature program at the University of Cincinnati. Do you agree with that?
I was going to be reading your mind in this show, Alex. I was going to bring this up.
There we go.
The Bearcats faithful, I think, for the first time, definitely this decade especially, but in the first time and since, I would say, the second season of the Luke Fickell era, is more excited and should be more excited about the basketball product that would be put out on the floor at Fifth Third Arena as opposed to the football product that would be put on the field at Nippert Stadium. Now, obviously, that sounds like a shot at the football program. It's not. You're going through a coaching change. You couldn't do anything about that. They did all they could to try to retain Luke Fickell. He chose to go to Wisconsin. There's nothing you could do there. And you're going into a new conference while going through a coaching change and having a roster overhaul to go through that Wes Miller had to do 2 years ago. So obviously he didn't have to do that going from the AAC into the Big 12 in his first year. And unfortunately, Scott Satterfield has to do that. But for the first time, as I just mentioned, I mean, when you look at the talent on this roster, 1 to 15, when you look at that starting 5, that 8 to 9 man rotation, which I would expect to see this season, as opposed to the injury-riddled 7-man rotation that they had last year, that arena is going to be bumping from that media section throughout the winter and springtime. And for Bearcats faithful, hopefully there's multiple media sections bumping in the middle of March and late March for the first NCAA tournament berth this decade from this program.
You certainly would love to see that. I mean, I'm looking at your starting 5 projection right now. And for those who have not read Russ's article, your article on All Bearcats.
Just went live yesterday afternoon. Yeah, so it's pretty new.
So you're starting 5, Davion Thomas, CJ Frederick, Seamus Lukosius, Victor Locken, and if he can get that mental health waiver, Aziz Bandaogo. The bench. This may be more exciting than the starting 5. Dan Skillins. We all saw his growth last year. Jamil Reynolds. We know what he can do. Odio Guama. I think he's being overlooked all of a sudden, Russ. I think him coming back is absolutely critical. And if Bandaogo doesn't play this year, there's your key player right there, I think. And then you have Jizzle James, Rayvon Griffith, John Newman III, who didn't play last year, Josh Reed, CJ Anthony, Sage Tolentino, Chase Kirkwood. I mean, when was the last time you saw a roster this talented? As you say, Russ, in this decade, probably back in the 1920 season.
It is, yeah. It's the 1920 season. Did they make it in the 1920 season? I can't remember.
Well,
was it the 19 season?
Well, in 2018, 2019, they did. They had a really good roster.
And then 1920, they missed it, right?
Well, that was the COVID year, so no one. I mean, essentially everybody.
Right. Duh.
Yeah.
I'm trying to forget that COVID year, Alex. I always try to forget.
Same here.
But yeah, it's as deep of a roster as this team, as I mentioned. Like it is like the start of the decade essentially for this Bearcats program. It's the kind of influx and the rocket fuel being put into this Wes Miller era, into an era that also includes an apparel change, going back to the Jordan brand. And so when you think about the reason why they wanted to do that Jordan brand switch right now, and the reason why they wanted to get this influx of talent in so quickly, is because you want to make noise day one in the Big 12 basketball circles. Day one readiness campaign. Perfect example right there. So I just think it's a really exciting time to be covering the team, really exciting time to be a Bearcats fan, just be around the program in general. And it's not like they're getting all these players, Alex, and it's all these stories about, oh, they threw the most money at him, that's why he came to UC. It's relationships. It's building sustainable types of practices in terms of recruiting, and especially recruiting the transfer portal. You and I talked about it with CJ Frederick about a month ago, the fact that Wes Miller establishes that relationship when he transfers from Iowa to Kentucky, and then a couple years later when he's ready to transfer again, who is already there with an established relationship? The guy who ends up getting him in Wes Miller. So all of the things that have kind of happened over the past 18 to 24 months of the beginning of the Wes Miller era, I don't know how you can be really upset about any of it, Alex, except for the fact that they lost a few winnable games here and there down the stretch last season. You go through some injury issues. I mean, but all in all, this team in this program has hit the requisite rebuilding benchmarks each and every time. Yeah. And now the next one to clear is, in my opinion, getting close to 9 to 10 wins in that first Big 12 run. And if you're around 9 to 10 wins, you should be, unless it's a disastrous non-conference for some reason, right there with a chance to get off the bubble and get into the dance on Selection Sunday. So it's a really, really fun time. And when you think about Aziz Bandaogo and the fact that so many Power 5, blue blood, top of the line schools wanted to go after Aziz Bandaogo with 2 years of eligibility left, legitimate tools to be a rim running center in the NBA, and he chooses Cincinnati. He chooses Wes Miller. That speaks volumes. It speaks volumes to what this crew is building over there and what they're going to hopefully continue to build in the recruiting circles here in this 2024 class, which will start heating up in the next coming couple months. But to follow a really great recruiting cycle with an even better transfer cycle is the reason why so many fans, and I mean, I try to stay as unbiased as possible. I didn't see this team having a really great shot looking at the roster outlook with Landers Nolly leaving a month and a half, 2 months ago to make the NCAA tournament. And now I'm not quite there yet that the expectation is to definitely go dancing, but I'm as close as I've ever been to that point since I've started covering this team in the last couple of years. I
said to the audience of Locked On Bearcats yesterday, it's okay if you have high expectations next year, I think.
Yeah, the talent would suggest that for sure.
And Russ, think about this. West Virginia made the NCAA tournament last year. Do you know how many conference games they won in the Big 12?
Like 7 or 8?
Seven.
Like that.
7.
Yeah, there you go.
So all you have to do, and Russ, here's the thing. Katrina Merriweather echoed this sentiment at the Day 1 tour here in Columbus last week. If you drop a conference game in the Big 12, it's not the end of the world. The margin for error, believe it or not, is greater. Like, Russ, here's the thing about last season. For as fun as it was to cover that team, and I got to go to some games at the end of the season, you knew when they lost to Arizona and Ohio State and Xavier, the season was essentially over before it even began. And what
Right,
made
because they were going to have to beat a Houston. They were going to have to mix in a Houston win, or at least a Memphis win, and neither of those happened. So.
Yeah, and when they lost that second game to Houston, for as valiant of an effort as they gave, you knew the season was over. You knew they had to win the conference tournament. You don't have to feel that way anymore, Russ. That's what's so great about this.
And I think it's one of the draws of this program now that it's a Big 12 outfit is that fact. That fact where Seamus Lukosius, CJ Frederick, Aziz Bandaogo, they can know that going into the Big 12, yes, it's going to be the biggest test they've ever experienced as a team basketball player in their lives. Yeah. But like you just mentioned, there's not that hanging by a thread, do or die. I am the number one option on a group of 5 or mid-major team that literally has to win close to 30 games to have any shot at the dance, or has to go undefeated throughout their conference tournament to have a shot at the dance like the Bearcats have had to do over the past couple of years. So I think that not that there's more pressure on the roster and this team as a whole, but I think there's, like you mentioned, less pressure individually because these guys know as a program that it's one game at a time, night by night, split a conference road trip here, split a conference home and away stint here. Like, you don't have to rattle off 5, 6, 7 straight wins in the Big 12 to be a tournament team. You might have to do that if you want to be a national champion contender, like we saw Kansas do throughout the season last year and all that kind of stuff. But to be a tournament level team, which is the bar for this program at this stage of its development, as you mentioned perfectly right there, great way to lay it out. They don't have to live and die by every single result in terms of needing wins to stack up towards that 30 win mark that oftentimes, if you want to be looked at as a real contender in the AAC, like Houston has been looked at the past couple of years, you have to get close to 30 wins to do that.
Yeah, and I think another thing too, you mentioned Houston. I said this yesterday. Houston isn't going to be able to run through the conference this year.
Right.
Because, we talk about how tough it's going to be for the Bearcats. Houston is not going to be able to stack wins against bottom feeders like South Florida or Tulsa anymore. Like, they too, Russ, are going to have to deal with that home and away Saturday to Monday deal. So essentially every team that's going into the Big 12 and every team that's there, it's kind of a level playing field. Do you see it that way?
I wouldn't say that in terms of, like, I don't think you're saying that in terms of overall talent, but in terms of the gauntlet that each team's going to have to go through. Is that kind of what you're saying? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. Like, now you can't afford to lose 5, 6 straight games in the Big 12. That's going to be very difficult to stay afloat in terms of wanting to meet your ultimate tournament goal this coming season. But it's another great point. Like, each team is going to go into this season, Alex. I don't know. I mean, BYU or even UCF is going to be, Johnny Dawkins has built a solid program there, and they're going to be competitive in this league. So I don't know that any team in this conference going into 23-24 thinks that they are not a tournament team. And that's just an incredible thing to think about with a 14-team Power 5 conference that every single program, justifiably in my eyes, I don't think it's crazy to say, has an internal feeling that if things break right here and there, especially in the conference slate, then they can make the tournament. It's definitely a factor for all 14.
You know what? I'm going to break some news right here. You ready for this?
What do you got?
So I said yesterday I've got some fun stuff planned for football season, but I'm going to go ahead and break some news. Live room after every conference, after every game next season, Russ, for basketball. Live room after every game. That's how I'm going to do the post-game recaps. And during conference play, 1 hour live rooms for when the Bearcats play Kansas, West Virginia, and Houston. So that could be up to 6 live rooms that are 1 hour after every game. How about that?
There you go. Pump it out. That'll be fun.
Oh, it's gonna be. It will be, especially if the if basketball. Like, can you imagine? Let's say they go out and get off to like a hot start in non-conference play, and let's say they go into the Cintas Center and beat Xavier
for the first time. That would be. Have they done? They haven't done it since 2001, I believe. Go into the Cintas Center. Yeah,
essentially,
it's been over 20 years. then the Bearcat fever will be as high as it's been this decade. Like it will be, and maybe even higher because of the fact that it is a Big 12 school now and not an AAC outfit. So I am very intrigued, Alex, for that final week of August when we get that Bearcats basketball schedule. Usually that's when it comes down. So counting the days till that.
Usually that's when, I mean, now we have gotten word, I know I'm running long on this segment, but Russ, the Bearcats, it looks like they are going to play the University of Dayton at Heritage Bank Center. That's going to be a fun game to cover.
Can we just get that as be a home and home? Can we make that a home and home? Why
exactly.
does that game have to be at Heritage Bank? It doesn't make any sense, man. Why can't one game this year be at Flyer Arena and one game next year be at Fifth Third or flip it? Like, I don't get why we got to do these at Heritage Bank.
It's two great arenas. Russ,
right,
they're
two great venues. And then you got to put it at the worst venue in between either city, which is Heritage Bank. I don't get it. But it will be fun to cover, and I'm sure. Hopefully, I'll see you down there if the work schedules work out.
Yes, you and me both.
Operative.
But anyway, we got a lot to. I want to get into the Bandaogo and the mental health waiver that he's got to obtain for his eligibility this season. We'll get into that. We'll get into more on men's basketball. Plus, we'll get back into the football conversation. Because, Russ, I haven't had you on since the Bearcats landed a 4-star transfer offensive lineman from an SEC school. We will get into that after I explain to you how this episode of Locked On Bearcats is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. So, make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs because right now new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Now, I love betting on FanDuel because they have great promotions every day. It's a safe and secure app, and I can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockdown and get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockdown. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, thank you for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen of every day. On tomorrow's show, I'm going to have a roster reset for Bearcats football, strengths, weaknesses, and the overall my overall analysis on the roster. We are just 102 days away, Russ, from the season opener against Eastern Kentucky. Looking forward to that.
Getting there. It's getting close. Cannot wait for football season. It's going to be
we're less than 3 months away from Higher Ground starting. Pretty soon, Russ, you know what I can't wait for? Is when the Athlon Sports Magazine comes out.
Oh, yeah. With, actually, no, Phil Steele, my guy.
Phil Steele.
That's the one I like looking at. But yeah, there's a lot of good ones. Athlon Sports is solid. They're all good.
I mean, Phil Steele, he might use every single square inch of every page in that magazine.
Yeah. No wasted space on the pages.
We're talking about no wasted space. And you know what's really fascinating, Russ, is when you think about what Wes Miller's done, as you mentioned, over the last 18 and 24 months. Let's run through the players he's gotten to come to the program. And it's not just transfers. But as far as transfers, you're able to land Landers Nolly II, who's going to be potentially a first-round draft pick, maybe a lottery pick this year. You're going to get
No. Landers Nolly will not be a first round.
Will not be a first round. Excuse me for hyping him up.
Maybe drafted. I would be a little shocked if he gets drafted. Maybe gets a shot in the league, but a professional basketball player in Landers. Okay. There's no way he's going to be a
professional basketball player.
Unfortunately.
Excuse me. All right. He's able to land him. He's able to land Kalua Zikpe. He's able to land Rob Finnessy. And then this year, CJ Frederick, Seamus Lukosius, Aziz Bandaogo, Jamil Reynolds from high major programs. And then you think about the players he's able to land in recruiting. Guys like Rayvon Griffith, Jizzle James. I think what's so interesting, Russ, is, and I don't know if you've seen this. Do you watch A Football Life on NFL Network?
I've seen a few of them. Yeah, which one?
So Edgerrin James, there's one on Edgerrin James, former running back of the Indianapolis Colts, of course, Jizzle's dad.
Right.
And what's so great is they show Jizzle's commitment in the episode. And he's playing for the Cincinnati Bearcats. Russ, how great is that?
That's pretty cool. Very cool. It's going to be cool. Another way for this program to get even more spotlight shined on it through Edgerrin James. Obviously, Indianapolis Colts, great. Arizona Cardinals, great. I believe, he's a Hall of Famer,
class
right?
of 2016. He is in the Hall of Fame.
There you go.
And
So you get a Hall of Famer on the sideline for all those home games. It's only it can't do bad things for you, especially with a guy with a pretty much stand up career from Edgerrin James for sure. So
no question
it's
about
gonna be a great
that.
addition.
No question about that. I mean, one of the best offenses in NFL history, recent NFL history for sure. So to kind of take us inside with what you know about the mental health waiver that Bandaogo has to go after, because Russ, it is kind of reminding me a little bit of James Hudson in 2019 and that whole saga that peaked right before the 2019 season started with James Hudson, Michigan, Jim Harbaugh. So kind of take us inside what's going on here with Aziz Bandaogo.
Yeah, so he has to apply for the mental health waiver to transfer a second time as a non-graduate player who has already transferred first from Akron to Utah Valley before last season. To get that back-to-back transfer allowed, you have to be able to, if you're going for a mental health waiver, I'm pretty sure they're trying to make people prove why their mental health is getting affected in their current situation. Me personally, as a there's no PhD next to my name, so I don't know how necessarily you make someone prove that they're not having great mental health. That seems like a sticky situation to me.
Yeah.
But all in all, the feeling around the sport is that this time around, this year and going forward, it's no longer going to be as easy as it has been in the prior years to get that second waiver approved. Usually there's been, like the last year and year before that, in the kind of earliest days of NIL, there's been no real problem with the second transfer getting approved. But now, amidst all of the college football movement in terms of players, all the college basketball movement in terms of players, there is kind of a little bit more of a stringent look at these waivers. So I'm not 100% confident that Bandaogo will be on the floor this year. That is not 100% certainty. I don't think anybody in the program can say that. Nobody knows except the NCAA, and we'll get the word from them before the start of the season. But as you mentioned, that's why retaining a guy like Odio Guama, him not entering the transfer portal, so massive. You got clear depth there that's had a lot of experience in this Wes Miller system. And if Aziz Bandaogo is able to play, it is a game changer. It is a player, Alex, that morphs and reconfigures all the things you can do ceiling-wise as a defense. He can defend on the perimeter. He can defend guarding down the lane. He can defend the rim as a roving center fielder, kind of a la Giannis Antetokounmpo, a la Anthony Davis in these recent NBA playoff runs. So Aziz Bandaogo adds a level of athleticism, a level of verticality in terms of a rim running five that can go up and get lobs from a guy like Davion Thomas, Jizzle James, Rayvon Griffith, all those guards that this team just didn't have before his signing. They did not have this level of athleticism at the 4 or 5 position, and now they have it in one of the, I would say, deepest front courts in America right now with Odio Guama, Victor Locken, Jamil Riddles, and Aziz Bandaogo. That is a monstrous foursome right there, and one that should be a nice staple to lean on in the Big 12, especially, Alex, if Victor Locken can unlock that jump shot a little bit, expand his game from 1 to 9 feet to 1 to 24 feet, maybe 2 to 3 threes a game for Victor Locken, 5 to 6 possessions where he's able to space the floor and really unlock the rim, get those guards moving downhill a little bit more. You move out a 4 from the other team and get more space in the interior. And then you can allow Aziz Bandaogo, Jamil Reynolds to do their thing at the 5 position. Victor Locken, to me, and that jump shot is kind of the skeleton key for this team's offensive ceiling and this rotation's offensive ceiling in terms of getting a strong 8 to 9 men on the floor throughout this conference slate, which I think they're going to need that to be able to hold up against the rigors and the physicality in the Big 12. Where it was last year, I think there was 7 guys that played 500 plus minutes. Obviously, that was probably going to be closer to 8 to 9, but Rob Fennessy goes down, John Newman III goes down. You get multiple injuries to big name guys on the roster. Knock on wood, Bearcats fans hoping that doesn't happen. And obviously the media hoping that doesn't happen this season.
No, I agree with you. And I think what I would want to know as a Bearcats fan is when could we hear about when that mental health waiver is approved, or when, like, what's the timeline, Russ, for that?
I got no idea. No idea when that waiver will get approved, but we'll get a word from the program as soon as it is, because they're not going to. And once the waiver is approved or it's decided, that's when I'm guessing they will announce the transfer. But I'm not sure. Maybe they announce it before. We'll see. But I mean, with a defensive talent like that, you're willing to wait a year. Fine, we'll wait a year. If you're the Bearcats coaching staff, he's still got 2 years of eligibility left, still a young talent, and a guy who allows just 39.8% shooting inside the arc, and team scored 0.88 points per possession when Bandaogo was on the floor per hooplins.com. That is a staggering number. I mean, the average offense in basketball is usually right around 1.05, 1.06 points per possession. To be that low and that efficient, I know it's obviously in the mid-major ranks, but he still should be able to carry that over it in some modicum of force if he plays this year or in 2024-25.
If you know who Victor Lockett needs to be, like Trey Scott. You can be like Trey Scott
that would work
in 2020 and give like 2 to 3 threes a game. This offense could be really
huge, man. It would be so huge. It would unlock everything. Don't you agree? I mean,
yeah.
If Victor Lockett can be a stretch 4 on this team, and you think about the ways that complements Day Thomas, the ways that complements Jizzle James, 2 downhill attacking guards, I think it would be a really, really great thing. And it's just great foresight, once again, from Wes Miller, who talked with us all throughout the season last year about how that's one of the biggest things Vic's been working on. Why has he been working on it? Not only to expand Vic's game, obviously, individually, but for this team and this program's future. Wes Miller obviously realized that having a stretch 4 is going to be very imperative and a potential game changer in the Big 12.
It's just unbelievable to think about. Where this program was 2 years ago, now they got the Jordan Brand unis back. Now they're going to the Big 12. I mean, it's remarkable when you think about it.
It is. And it's the tip of the cap to John Cunningham, athletic director at UC, for the hire he made there, his first hire here, major hire in terms of bringing in major sports heads. And so far, so good. Now, obviously, Bearcats fans are like, all right, there hasn't been any, and I hear you. There hasn't been any tournament runs.
Yeah.
There hasn't been any tournament bursts. There hasn't been any conference tournament runs. There hasn't been any regular season conference championships. None of that's happened yet, obviously. And the staff will be the first ones to say that they haven't accomplished really anything of note yet. But in terms of the bars that you have to meet as a rebuilding program with, as you mentioned, 4 scholarship players 24 months ago, it's impressive. That's all.
It is impressive. And John Cunningham, I said this about him last week at the Day 1 tour. He won that evening. I mean, every time I hear him speak and every time I hear him talk about what's going on with inside Bearcat athletics, it makes me more attracted to him as a director of athletics. And I think what's really telling is 3 of the 5 head coaches that were on hand in Columbus on Thursday, in addition to Satterfield, Miller, Katrina Merriweather, Molly Alvey, Mandy Commons, DeSale, 3 are John Cunningham hires. 3 of the 5 coaches on hand were Cunningham hires. And the other 2 are still very, very successful head coaches. And I don't mean this in any way, in any shot, but as we saw over the weekend, Russ, USC, or now former USC Director of Athletics Mike Bone, resigned. So the Bearcats have not only survived that, and I remember that being a big blow to the university at the time. I was a big Mike Bone fan. And they were able to survive that, hire John Cunningham, make it through COVID-19, and now look where this athletic program is heading.
What's the gif with the Donald Duck jumping into the pile of gold coins and then spitting one out? That's what just picture that, people. That's all you got to picture, because that's exactly where this athletics program is heading. A lot more cash influxing over the next few years, a la the Big 12. It's going to be a wonderful thing for all the facilities. They had the renditions of the
how does that look?
Of the new athletic facility come out a couple weeks ago. That looks fantastic. I can't wait. I cannot wait, Alex, till I can finally use the cut through on UC's campus to get to Fifth Third Arena. And as I cut through, I want to be looking at a beautiful state-of-the-art athletic facility on my left. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be great.
It's going to be. It's going to be fantastic where this university is going, and we're going to be there to cover for it. And this podcast is going to keep going. Looking forward to that. When we return, there's some football news. It kind of feels like we're entering that period where not a lot's happening on the football front, Russ, but there are some things, and we'll get to that next on Locked On Bearcats. We talk about Wes Miller and his ability to recruit, Russ. Scott Satterfield, same way. Now, Scott Satterfield is the same way. Especially when you consider landing a guy like Deondre Buford, 4-star offensive lineman from Kentucky. How about that?
Yeah, it's a decent depth get, I think, but I'm not going to be throwing the same praise at Scott Satterfield as we've seen in terms of transfer portal additions as we've seen from the Bearcats basketball side. Like, there's been some solid depth pieces here and there, and especially the UConn wide receiver. I think he's going to be a great addition, as well as a potential reuniting with Emory Jones and Xavier Henderson, one of the leading Florida wide receivers last year. That is expected to happen. The announcement just hasn't happened yet. I fully expect Henderson to reunite with Emory Jones, who he caught passes from in 2021 at Florida. And so that would, I think, give them a pretty solid haul, especially wide receiver wise from this transfer portal. But I mean, Deondre Buford, sure, I can't wait to cover him. Sure, he's a very nice guy, but he did not perform well at all as a member of the Kentucky Wildcats. Graded 57 overall mark in 2022, 57 overall PFF grade. That ranks 68th out of 97 offensive linemen to play 190 snaps. And he did run block very well. So that's a good addition in terms of that front. I think that's the biggest reason why they wanted to bring Buford in, is his acumen in the run blocking game was actually, let's see here, 22nd among all 97 SEC qualified offensive linemen in run blocking with a 79 overall grade. So he should be able to, I think, maybe give John Williams, Philip Wilder a little run for their money at either of those tackle spots. Buford's played a good mix at different spots in the line. So he will primarily, I'm sure, go after one of those tackle spots, and we'll see what happens with that depth in a position where I know the coaching staff and just kind of everybody around the team felt like that's a spot where there could be a little bit more competition. And that's what they added in Deondre Buford, who is a decent get, but that is going to knock your socks off or obviously lead a podcast like Aziz Bandaogo did today. Solid get, though, in Deondre Buford.
Did you happen to read the article in Sports Illustrated featuring Sauce Gardner?
Yes, the feature. It was awesome. Very well done.
Fantastic. Have you gotten the actual copy yet?
No, the Sports Illustrated, I'm not. I'll end up just putting it in storage somewhere. I'm not going to buy it, but good collector's item for sure.
You would do that like I do to my 1,000 Sports Illustrated covers that are currently at storage in my aunt's house. My aunt and uncle's house. My uncle, God rest his soul. He and my aunt at their house, they have a storage unit in their basement. So I have 1,000 covers of Sports Illustrated in their basement.
Wow, that's awesome. That's like a whole trip down memory lane right there of sports history.
Including, Russ, Danny Fortson on the cover of the 96-97 college basketball preview issue.
There you go. I love it. Sports Illustrated. I used to get those all the time as a kid.
Yeah, same here. Do you think Sauce Gardner is going to be someday the greatest athlete to ever come through the University of Cincinnati?
That's tough, man. That's tough. He's got to go up against Koufax and Oscar Robertson.
True.
Both are. Both are top 10 players. Sandy, a top 5 pitcher of all time, definitively a top 10 pitcher of all time. Oscar Robertson, right there as a top 10 player in the history of the NBA, history of basketball. It's going to be very. I will say now, Sauce Gardner will not go down. I will go out on a limb, Alex, and say that Sauce Gardner will not go down as the greatest athlete to ever come out of the University of Cincinnati. Now, while they were there, very possible. He's right up there with Oscar Robertson. You can make that case, but I still think the Big O is going to be the one guy with a statue outside of their playing arena. And he also accomplished a little bit more in college than Sauce Gardner then. But two fantastic talents. And then tying a bow on the transfer portal talk, Aaron Turner, the UConn wide receiver, who I like a lot and I think should be a nice slot addition for the team. Overall, the offense has gotten better, has added requisite depth, has gotten better in this transfer portal cycle. So that's good to see.
Look, I tell people, and I was asked this by Locked On Cougars host Jay Catch 2 weeks ago, the program is in better hands than maybe some fans think. I truly think that.
We're going to find out. Vegas does not think so. 4.5 wins.
But what that's according to? What sports book is that according to?
It opened up at 4.5 on DraftKings and FanDuel and has since been bet up to 5. So that 4.5 number I think it lasted less than 3 days. And the Sharks
so to 5.
Immediately made sure that number disappeared.
I haven't had you on since the NFL schedule came out. And what I like most about it is, in addition to the Bengals, Sauce Gardner is going to be featured in a lot of marquee games, Russ.
Yeah, that'll be good. Be good for the fans to see that.
Chiefs, Jets. For any Bearcats fan, that's a must-see game.
Yeah, we'll see Travis Kelce on Sauce Gardner a little bit, I'm sure. Maybe 1 or 2 snaps at the least.
Well, that's gonna be must-see TV. Russ Heltman, my colleague at AllBearcats and Sports Illustrated, kind enough to join me today. I was going to say this yesterday. I said there was a birthday yesterday in the Bearcats community, Russ. I didn't even mention it. But yesterday was Derek Forrest's birthday. So happy belated birthday to Derek Forrest.
Coming off a breakout season as well. He should be I think he should be entrenched as one of the starting safeties now after showing out like he did for the Commanders this past year. He had a great
Washington Commanders, a fantastic player, 16 tackles against Central Florida back in 2019.
Nasty player for the Bearcats.
And Neil and I were talking about this. You think about that, how good the Bearcats secondary was over the years. Guys like Derek Forrest, James Wiggins, Sauce Gardner, Kobe Bryant, Javon Hicks, Brian Cook. I mean, it's a who's who of talent in that secondary.
Yep, a lot of great guys. It's starting to become a defensive back factory. It's not DBU, because I hate when people do that. Like 3 guys will come out from one school and they'll be like, "Oh, it's DBU," and then they'll forget about the past 100 years of draft history from different schools. But a burgeoning defensive back factory, to say the least.
No question about that. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see how a guy like Brian Threats does this year for Cincinnati.
And Taj Ward. Can Taj Ward maybe make a late career NFL push at a different position? Two intriguing talents.
It'll be interesting to find out. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with the secondary. Russ, thanks for joining me. Best wishes to you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Love coming on the show, and we'll do it again soon.
We will definitely do it again. Thanks to Russ. Thank you for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On tomorrow's show, roster reset. What I like, strengths, weaknesses, and overall state of the Bearcats roster as we head into the 2023 football season. I'm on Twitter, Frankie_90 with 2 N's and an ATI. Instagram, AlexFrankNet_, and email, alex3frank@gmail.com. Back tomorrow on Locked On Bearcats. Have a great rest of your day. Locked On Bearcats is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.